Perhaps most importantly, for 5 years I served as the faculty chair of a new required course on leadership and organizational behavior for our MBA program. The ambition of this course was to prepare our students for their first managerial assignments and help them develop the willingness and ability to learn how to lead over the course of their careers. We took seriously the notion that we could not teach our students to manage; they had to teach themselves. Our primary ambition was to develop a course that would provide the critical resources MBAs would need to capitalize on their on-the-job learning experiences after leaving business school. Of course, my colleagues and I realized that we could not predict just what those experiences would be. Just think how much has changed in the past 10 years. For example, consider some of the new terms that have entered our vocabulary in the last decade: 24/7, e-commerce, virtual teams, and Euro, to name just a few. One thing we knew with certainty was that the work of management was becoming more complicated and vexing than ever before. In today's environment, managerial work, and especially the leadership functions associated with that work, are key drivers of organizational success. I do not doubt that if I were to study new managers today, I would hear much more insistently about leadership, change, and diversity. The ubiquity of these ideas in managerial conversations reflects the most immediate challenges facing today's managers. With increasing globalization and significant demographic changes in the workforce, a premium is being placed on the ability to lead diverse others through turbulent times. Not only do managers need to develop the personal capacity to manage, but they must also be able to create a context in which others are willing to learn and change so their organizations can continually adapt and innovate. New managers must move beyond the pervasive myth of management as simply coping with the status quo. Too often, managers focus only on execution and handling the complexity of their current assignments, neglecting their responsibilities for innovation and preparing for the future. Organizations must continually revitalize and transform themselves to compete today. Thus, managers must be effective change agents who understand how to overcome resistance to change, deal with the inevitable stresses associated with change, and implement appropriate change strategies. In the 21st century, new managers must be prepared to cope with both complexity and change. John Kotter, a renowned leadership expert, argues that leadership and management are two distinctive and complementary systems of action. Each has its own function and characteristic activities. Management is about coping with complexity. Leadership, by contrast, is about coping with change. As Kotter goes on to point out, most managerial positions require both types of expertise. He worries, however, that often managers neglect their leadership or change agent responsibilities. Kotter and others argued that in the 1980s and 1990s, organizations were too often overmanaged and underled. As a result, organizations found it difficult to adapt and change as demanded by the competitive environment. Indeed, as the listener will hear, the new managers I studied did not devote much attention to their roles as agents of change. Instead, they saw themselves principally as targets of change, implementing the change initiatives of their superiors. Given the growing scale and scope of organizations today, even startups can be global, managers find themselves grappling with much more complexity. This leads me to worry that, too often, organizations today are both underled and undermanaged. When I published the first edition of this book, some contended that I did not devote enough attention to the topic of leadership specifically. I chose not to because that was not the way the new managers framed their experience, and my first responsibility was to stay rooted in the authenticity of their reported experiences. But of course, leadership, including the functions of setting direction and inspiring others to pursue it, is critical, especially in today's turbulent times. Delving more deeply into this debate is the subject of my next project, in which I move beyond a conception of leadership as managing change to one of leadership as developing culture. For this expanded edition, when I describe the work of new managers, I mean to include both their management, coping with complexity, and leadership, coping with change.